don't want to move very fast. You want to try to keep something between you and your target, so you're not in the open, you know.
In the small community near Yock, Montana, locals weren't surprised by the news, but they were deeply moved. Those who knew Tom personally described him as humble, kind, and fiercely independent. He wasn't the type to seek fame, even when it found him. In fact, many believe that when Tom and Nancy stepped away from mountain men, they did it because they wanted peace and privacy, not recognition. Some neighbors even admitted they hadn't realized how symbolic the cabin had become until after it was empty. For decades, it had stood as a reminder of what it meant to truly live in harmony with nature. It wasn't about wealth or success. It was about balance, endurance, and gratitude. And now, knowing that Tom had left it behind with such intention, it became something almost sacred to those who'd shared the valley with him. A few fans made the journey to the Yock just to see the area for themselves, not to invade privacy, but to pay quiet respect. They didn't enter the cabin, but they stood nearby, taking in the same mountain air Tom once breathed every morning. One visitor described it as the most peaceful silence I've ever felt, like the woods themselves were telling his story. Even the producers of Mountain Men reportedly expressed how deeply they were moved by the discovery. Though the show had captured Tom's life for millions to see, they admitted that what was found inside the cabin revealed the heart of who he really was. Not the rugged trapper or the survivalist, but the philosopher who found freedom in simplicity. As the online discussions grew, so did the admiration for Tom's decision to live on his own terms. People began reflecting on what his life represented in a world that's grown more complicated and dependent on technology. His story reminded them that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in peace, independence, and love for the world around you. Nancy's presence in this story didn't go unnoticed either. Many fans expressed admiration for her devotion and resilience, standing beside Tom through decades of harsh winters, isolation, and hard work. Together, they had built not only a cabin, but a legacy of partnership and perseverance. What they left behind wasn't a mystery. It was a message. Every object, every carving, and every letter told the same story. Live simply, love deeply, and leave quietly. It became a quote that fans began sharing online, printing on shirts, and using as a reminder that even in a fast-paced, noisy world, it's still possible to find peace in the quiet corners of life. For those who once watched Tom Orr from their living rooms, that message hit home. Because in the end, the real shock wasn't what they found inside his cabin. It was what his life revealed about our own. After the stories spread about what had been found inside Tom Orr's cabin, fans from all over the world were left reflecting on what the discovery truly meant. It wasn't about lost treasure, mystery, or scandal. It was about a man who had quietly lived his dream and left behind a living reminder of what really matters. Tom Orr's name had always been associated with strength, wilderness, and independence. But now, his legacy had grown into something much deeper: wisdom. Tom and Nancy eventually settled into a quieter rhythm of life, away from the spotlight of mountain men. They had spent decades braving the bitter cold of Montana's winters, hauling wood, trapping, tanning, and living completely off the grid. So when they decided to move closer to civilization in their later years, it wasn't a sign of giving up. It was a choice born out of love and practicality. Age, as it does to everyone, began to whisper its limits, and Tom wanted to ensure that Nancy could enjoy comfort and safety after so many years of rugged living. Yet, even in their new surroundings, Tom never truly left the wilderness behind. Those who've seen him in recent years say he still carries that same calm, quiet spirit. The glint in his eyes that speaks of countless nights under the stars and the deep satisfaction that comes from earning every meal, every fire, every moment of peace. The cabin in the Yock remains a symbol of the life they built together. For locals, it stands as a monument, not to fame, but to endurance. Every log and every handmade tool inside carries the mark of authenticity that can't be replicated. It's more than a home. It's a story frozen in time. For younger generations discovering mountain men for the first time, Tom Orr represents something rare and pure, a bridge between past and present. In a world driven by convenience and technology, his life reminds people that happiness doesn't come from screens or possessions, but from purpose, patience, and persistence. The shock of what was found inside his cabin wasn't in its contents, but in what it revealed about the man who built it. That his greatest wealth was never material. It was the peace he found by living simply. Nancy, ever devoted and soft-spoken, has often been the heart behind Tom's success. Their bond, forged through years of hardship and shared dreams, remains one of the most admired parts of their story. Fans often say that while Tom showed us how to live, Nancy showed us how to love. Together, they embodied the idea that happiness doesn't depend on luxury, it depends on gratitude. Even now, Tom's philosophy continues to inspire thousands. His story has become a call to slow down, reconnect with nature, and rediscover the joy of self-reliance. The letters and carvings left behind in that cabin weren't messages to the world. They were pieces of a philosophy that's as timeless as the mountains themselves. Many fans say that Tom Orr didn't just live off the land, he became part of it. Every river he fished, every hide he tanned, and every trail he walked was part of a rhythm he understood better than most. And perhaps that's why his story feels so powerful, because it's not about survival, but about harmony. In the end, the shocking thing about what was found inside Tom Orr's cabin wasn't an object at all. It was a feeling. The realization that a man who lived with so little had actually discovered everything worth having. His tools may have grown rusty, his fire may have gone cold, but the lessons he left behind still burn bright. Tom Orr's life is proof that simplicity isn't weakness, it's freedom. And long after the snow melts off the Yaak Valley and the cameras fade to black, the spirit of that old mountain man will still whisper through the trees. Live simply, love deeply, leave quietly. For years, fans of mountain men have admired Tom Orr's quiet, rugged life deep in the Montana wilderness. Living miles from the nearest town, Tom built his log cabin by hand, relying on his own skills to survive the brutal winters and harsh conditions of the Yaak Valley. But just recently, something happened that has left everyone stunned. According to reports from locals and visitors, a discovery inside Tom Orr's remote cabin has sparked a wave of speculation. And not even the most loyal fans could have seen this coming. People who know Tom describe him as private, humble, and deeply connected to nature. So when word spread that a crew stumbled upon something unexpected during a recent visit, the mystery only deepened. Was it an old secret from his trapping days? A collection he never showed on camera? Or something far more personal? Something that reveals the truth about why Tom decided to step away from the spotlight? Whatever they found inside that cabin, one thing's certain, it's shaken even those who thought they knew the legendary mountain man best. Stay with us as we uncover the story behind the cabin, the rumors surrounding the discovery, and the emotional truth about Tom Orr's life far beyond the cameras of long before television crews arrived in the Yaak Valley. Tom Orr was already living the life most people only dream about, or fear. Born in Illinois in 1943, Tom grew up with a fascination for the old ways of the American frontier. As a young man, he was a rodeo cowboy, traveling from town to town, risking his life on the back of raging bulls and broncos. The adrenaline was addictive, but the years took their toll. By his 40s, the injuries had piled up, and Tom knew he couldn't live that way forever. That's when he made a choice that would change everything. He walked away from the rodeo, from the noise, and from the modern world itself. Together with his wife, Nancy, Tom ventured deep into the remote mountains of northwestern Montana. There, surrounded by towering pines and icy rivers, they began to build a new life, one rooted in simplicity and survival. They had no blueprint, no power tools, and no guarantee that the harsh wilderness would spare them. But day by day, log by log, Tom built their cabin from scratch, shaping every beam and board with his own hands. What stood at the end wasn't just a shelter, it was a symbol of freedom. For decades, Tom and Nancy lived in near-total isolation. Their days revolved around hunting, trapping, and tanning hides. the same crafts that sustained mountain men 200 years earlier. When Mountain Men premiered on the History Channel, Tom quickly became one of the show's most beloved figures. Viewers were captivated by his quiet wisdom, his deep respect for nature, and his old-world craftsmanship that seemed untouched by time. But behind the peaceful scenes of hand-stitched moccasins and snow-covered valleys, there were whispers of change. The winters were getting harder, the labor more demanding, and the solitude deeper. Even the most seasoned frontiersmen can't escape the passage of time. So when Tom and Nancy finally decided to step away from Mountain Men, fans assumed they wanted privacy, and perhaps a slower life after decades of hard living. But what no one expected was that their cabin, the place that had become a symbol of strength and independence, would soon become the center of a mystery that caught everyone off guard. In recent months, visitors and locals who ventured near Tom's old homestead began sharing stories online, strange tales of what was discovered inside after the oars had left. Some claimed it looked frozen in time, as if they had stepped back into the 1800s. Others hinted at something much deeper, something that revealed a side of Tom Orr no one had ever seen before. As speculation grew, one question began to echo among fans and neighbors alike. What did they actually find inside that cabin? Because for those who know Tom, the man who once said he just wanted to live free and die free, there was always more to his story than the cameras could ever capture. The cabin wasn't just a home. It was a diary carved in wood and memory. And now, after all these years, it seems that diary has finally been opened. Mountain Men. When a small group of visitors arrived at Tom Orr's old cabin deep in the Yaak Valley, they expected to see what most fans imagined, a simple, hand-built log home filled with tools, furs, and the marks of a man who had lived close to the earth. But what they found went far beyond that. It was as if time itself had stopped inside those wooden walls. The cabin stood silent, surrounded by tall pines and fresh snow. The air was cold and still, and the only sound was the crunch of boots on frost. As the door creaked open, a faint smell of wood smoke and leather filled the air, the unmistakable scent of Tom Orr's life. Every inch of the cabin told a story. The handmade furniture, the traps carefully hung on the wall, the old stove that had probably seen hundreds of Montana winters. But what caught everyone's attention was what had been left behind. A series of personal items that revealed a side of Tom few had ever known. In one corner sat a wooden chest, carved with initials that appeared to date back decades. Inside were hundreds of old photos, black and white snapshots of Tom's rodeo days, his early trapping years, and quiet moments with Nancy in the wilderness. But tucked beneath those photos were worn letters, personal notes written in Tom's own handwriting. Some were addressed to friends long gone, others were reflections on his life and choices. One note simply read, "If I ever have to leave this valley, part of me will always stay here." It was clear these weren't meant for the world to see. They were fragments of a man's soul, pieces of his journey that had never made it onto television. There were sketches of animals, old journal entries about bitter winters, and hand-drawn maps of the Yaak Valley showing the traps he used to set each season. To those who found them, it felt like stepping into the private thoughts of a man who had quietly become an icon. But perhaps the most unexpected discovery came from the far wall, where a large hide was stretched tight across a handmade frame. Etched into the hide with careful precision were the words, "Live simply, love deeply, and leave quietly." It wasn't a message for fame or legacy. It was Tom's philosophy, left like a final note to anyone who might one day find it. For fans who later heard about these discoveries, it was both moving and haunting. The items inside weren't treasures or valuables. They were memories, untouched and preserved like relics of a life most people could never imagine living. The cabin was not abandoned in haste. It had been left intentionally, respectfully, almost as though Tom wanted the space to remain exactly as it was. A time capsule of simplicity and peace. Those who visited said it felt spiritual, almost sacred. Even the smallest details, a pair of worn moccasins near the fire, an old rifle hanging by the door, a notebook half filled with sketches of elk and mountains, carried an emotional weight. As word spread about what was found, fans around the world began to see Tom Orr differently. The tough mountain man they'd watched on TV wasn't just surviving, he was living with purpose, leaving behind lessons carved not in stone, but in the life he lived every day. The discovery inside that cabin didn't expose scandal or mystery. It revealed truth. The truth about a man who wanted nothing more than to live honestly, love his wife, and leave the world just a little quieter than he found it. When word of what had been found inside Tom Orr's cabin began to spread, it didn't take long for the entire mountain men community to start talking. Fans who had followed Tom for years felt a deep emotional connection to him. And the thought of his cabin standing silent, filled with memories and mementos of a life lived off the land, stirred something profound. Social media pages dedicated to the show began lighting up with photos, tributes, and personal stories from people who said Tom had inspired them to live more simply and appreciate the little things in life. Many couldn't believe how personal the discovery was. The journals, letters, and carvings left behind showed a depth to Tom that even the television cameras couldn't capture. One fan wrote, "We didn't just watch Tom Orr survive, we watched him live the kind of life most of us only dream about." Another commented, "He left behind more wisdom in that cabin than most people find in a lifetime."